We will talk about certain basic issues related to the phenomenon called globalization, which is all encompassing today. It started in the 80s, and initially the formal effects of it were brought in through liberalization of hitherto existing economic policies of different countries. We remember the liberalization of Indian economy, for instance, in the early 90s. Before this, in most of the countries, trades, productions, businesses, etc., were limited to the citizens of those countries, companies, and corporations of those countries by and large, with a few exceptions. Foreign companies operated, but then the procedure of getting permission, etc., were very complicated. But with globalization, and many of its associated tenors like GATT, for example, general agreements in tariff and trade, there was an economic liberalization so far as the procedural part, production part of consumer goods, etc., are concerned. Those who support globalization, they say that it will bring in unforeseen economic growth, it will make all people have an equal chance in the modes, factors, and distribution of production. It helps us in becoming global citizens, etc. etc. All these are well known. I have shared 2 or 3 videos also, not my own, but already available in the net on this. However, in our paper 204, that is critical theory, we'll have to have, you know, a critical look on globalism. Look at rather this phenomenon of globalism or globalization. By the way, globalism is espousing the philosophy of globalization. Now, one of the key arguments offered by the apologists or supporters of globalization is that the days of colonialism are long gone. So, we should not take colonization as the key point of reference any longer, as is done in post colonial studies, but globalization, where all the globe come together. You see, it is not even internationalism. International nations exist as a conceptual category and actual category. That's why among nations, internationals. But when you say globe, it is the globe as a whole beyond nations. So they say that since the days of colonization are long past, long gone, globalization should be the new form of reference for everything that we study or everything that we do, etc. Here precisely lies our point of difference. The argument of post colonialism is that, you know, which is rational and logical enough, that far from being an end of colonization and colonialism, the so-called globalization is actually a sophisticated form of colonialism only, when you rule distant territories without having a colony. This happens because, though apparently we talk about the globe as the actor and the receiver when we mean globalization, but in practice it is not so. The globe is divided into two very disproportionate halves due to colonization. On the one side are those haves, those rich countries, the first world, Europe, European countries, America mainly, you know, and on the other side, I mean, there Canada, Australia, all these are first world countries. And on the other side, there are countries like India, Bangladesh, Africa, African countries, Sri Lanka. So, can there be an equal play in globalization? Definitely not. I mean, to the extent that an Indian or African society is Europeanized or Americanized, is not the same as, you know, some amount of Indianization, etc., of those European and American societies. For example, you can have rice curry in England now, or rajma chawal in America. That these are very limited. Lot of Indians are working there, but mainly as workforces. A very few reach the status of Gayatri Spivak or Amartya Sen, but we are technically providing the basic logistic supports, etc., as was done by indentured workers during colonialism. Now, so it is understood that, this is so very interesting that today we are so happy to find so many MNCs, multinational corporations or multinational companies, even we call them TNCs, transnational companies, and we are happy to buy a certain kind of American chicken or Italian pizza, even in a place like Silchar or Dibrugarh, for instance, those areas of Assam, northeast. On the other side, what is happening is that a large flow of capital from our indigenous people is going directly abroad through these multinational corporations. We may argue that they are giving employability to our youth, etc. But the kind of salary and other things that come from these corporations, companies to our people is way far less than the profit they take back home. This has been a criticism of globalization. It is not what I say, there are links below, but it has been a criticism. Secondly, the second criticism is that companies and corporations, there is a rampant attempt at privatization everywhere now. This has been backed by the philosophy of globalization that private property should thrive. The problem is private property or private corporations, etc., will keep producing only till that point when they can maximize their profit. The moment they reach a saturation point, or they start earning losses, those will be stopped without any accountability. So that is not possible with government enterprises. Fortunately, in India we are still operating in a mixed mode. State responsibilities by and large there, but things are changing all over the world now. Then these will not be a hunky-dory picture for a long time, when in every field all private operators are there. This is also a worrisome part of globalization, which we undermine when we happily associate ourselves with the short-term gains associated with MNCs, foreign travels, creature comfort goods, etc., etc., which we are getting readily. You just see how the individual, local restaurants, shops, etc., are gradually being withered in a very subtle way. Only those who are very powerful among our local things will survive. Otherwise, these are all, going to end at the malls, super shoppies, where the shots are called by actually the bigger companies, or the smaller companies when they come together, indigenous companies, and operate, and there too the organizing profit is taken away by a third party. Think about the car services that have been introduced in India. In the long run, there would be problem. In the short run, we are enjoying is much better than going by autos or rickshaws. You make a call, things come, take you, drop you thereby. Who is organizing them? Things were already there in India. Drivers are ours, cars are ours, but organization and part of profit is going elsewhere. That is also globalization, the siphoning of wealth. So that is why post-colonial critics say that far from being an end of colonialism, this is an intense and a very sophisticated form of colonialism, where the global capital is constituted by taking all the more from the so-called third world or poorer world, and enrich the already existing structures of capital in Europe and America. So a critic called George Ritzer, Ritzer, has called globalization McDonaldization of society. McDonald's. It's a symbolic term, not only McDonald's, there are many other companies. We like to be branded, wear branded things and all, mostly Europeans. Now, this book, McDonaldization of Society by Ritzer, remember, 1993 published. So he was one of the very first to point out this flip side of globalization. There will be a counter question immediately, I know, and I expect questions to come. It is so boring to have a one-way traffic. Please comment in the comment section in the videos, YouTube video. What about Asian colonialism, say Chinese colonialism, people, imperialism, we can say colonialism, there is direct colony, so no. So yes, post-colonialism actually, though it started as a critique of original European colonization, we are not to support any colonization. However, Asian colonialism or Chinese colonialism will take another 200 years to reach the status or impact that European colonialism has had. Just think about the simple phenomenon that we are talking to each other in English, none of our language. I say it in almost every video. Whereas England is a country thousands of miles away from us. And none of us know Chinese till late. We have momos and chow chows and Maggie. This is also probably Chinese dishes we have at times. China is our almost next neighbor. Now, so which colonialism has been more corrosive to our cultural traditions? Anyway, so we have to be very critical of so-called globalization. It is not to be celebrated uncritically. Anyway, now the channels of globalization, how did it come? Apart from the economic thing, that we'll have to talk about. One thing is music, the pop, rap, and all those kinds of music that has been a kind of stronghold for globalization for a very long time. Second thing is cinema. Cinema also for a long time have been bringing in European and Western cultures. Then another thing is there is some another thing apart from cinema and the power just went off is today internet. Internet is the most powerful source of distributing global cultural values, to which we are losing out our own cultural values. Again, the reaction to it has been equally disastrous. There is a kind of rampant surge in nativism, not only in India, but all over the world. In fact, it is a kind of contradiction of the present world. That on the one hand, we are talking about, some of us are talking about a globalization, uh, by which, of course, internally we refer to Americanization of the world or Europeanization of the world, not vice versa. However, on the one hand, there is a call for globalization, for being global citizens. On the other hand, there is rampant rise in identity politics everywhere. Racism, you know, fundamentalism, discourses, hateful discourses over citizenship. Certain kinds of people are cherry picked and otherized. So, why is this happening if globalization is our present philosophy? Because the globalization itself is not global, it is by the West, for the West, and actually of the West, if I may borrow from that famous definition of democracy. So there are alternative suggestions. Let there be globalization from global south, etc., etc. But these are easier said than done. So what we have learned today is to look critically at globalization, 204 Unit 5, and explore the different channels of how global culture infects us: pop music, rap music, cinema, all those things. Then branded companies of food, of creature comfort, and other things. And then internet today, the most potent vehicle of globalization. It has almost brought all of us to a state of quote unquote statelessness. You can talk to anywhere right now in Japan, German, provided they have your ID, etc. So, this kind of bringing togetherness. But in spite of all this rampant rise in poverty, rise in wealth is also there, but in very handful people. So it was said that, for example, in India, 10 to 12 people have the almost 60 to 70% of India's total wealth. That kind of thing was not seen even during the days of direct colonialism, that were there were lots of rajas, maharajas, rich people, etc. Now globalization is concentrating wealth in much fewer hands. Whereas we are under the illusion or hallucination, etc., that we have a ticket to Hollywood at any moment. If you are industrious, if you can do it, there is success from you. But fortunately or unfortunately, all this have been given a lie to by the current epidemic. Now the globe is in crisis, and here we come to another potent critique of globalization. You know why this endemic or pandemic is there? Epidemics used to be there earlier, though we did not face them. We have read in storybooks. However, they were largely local or at the most regional, almost never national. There were, I'm talking about India for an example, there were stories of plague during British rule in India. Sister Nivedita served people in Calcutta along with Vivekananda and his other disciples. For example, if you read Sharat Chandra Chatterjee's description of plague, again is there. But those are still limited. Now, one of the things that we take pride on related to globalization is that the whole world is connected. It is said you can have your breakfast in Japan, lunch in India, and dinner in America in one day, in the same day. So now disease is also spreading. Without this kind of communication or communicability of people all over the world, this thing would not have happened. Now the remedy is, alternative is being given is now this online. You do meetings online, WhatsApp. Even right now we are doing YouTube. I'll upload it on YouTube. But also be critical. This rise in revenues and uses of this online. Already you have been doing, but now there's tremendous rise. Where is the profit going? Who are the owners of these companies? Mostly located in Europe and America. We may have one CEO or two from India, but finally, so either ways, actually, we are caught in a uh, mass, kind of intrigue, mass intrigue of intricate networks, which finally takes from us more than it gives. So, all these were to point out that there is a strong flip side or semi side of the so-called globalization. The study of this is sometimes called critical globalism. You may, for some alternative view or additional view, please look up that Anyalumba's book Colonialism, Postcolonialism, the second edition. There is a chapter, it is the concluding chapter of the book. Concluding chapter. The name is you know Globalization and the Future of Postcolonial Studies. In this, she had argued convincingly some of the points that I have spoken about, and in fact, she has added more. Second edition, concluding chapter, Anyalumba. And of course, other materials will obviously be there. But you try to rethink what I have said. These are, of course, none of these are my own words. Actually, I have only organized them, and some examples I have created. This is there in the critical globalization studies or critical globalism studies. or even globalization studies. So do not think globalization to be a very natural, democratic, economic freedom and communicative freedom for all citizens of the world. It is a highly mediated business game also played on by the prime stakeholders of erstwhile colonialism and the new stakeholder, that is America. And thank you very much.